Hi, and welcome to Titans Together, a Teen Titans retrospective video podcast. I am Joe Pride, joined once again with my co-host.
Hi, I'm Geeky JP.
And we are on volume 4 of the Marv, Wolfman, George Perez run of Teen Titans from the 80s. So much happens in this set of issues that my brain was hurting by the end of it. We bounced from weird occult to space to New York in the 80s. It gets crazy, this volume. A nice step up from the weird campfire stories we got last week, or last month. You know, I think it's a welcome return to comic book format. I appreciated the storytelling aspects of reintroducing everyone's bios and their origin stories and all that fun stuff, but I want the story to propel forward, and this definitely did it.
I felt pretty good about it. I will, I guess, always end up making the little comments about it sure is 80s, though. I mean, it's not up to contemporary standards of anything, but it's still, in a retrospective perspective, they were the cutting edge for the day. They were the most inclusive for the day. I think what's really cool about this particular volume is that it ends with a very special episode, as it were. The last 2 issues are featured on the idea of runaway teens, and that came from the current publisher at DC at the time was Jeanette Kahn, and she is a very big figure in DC history in terms of just sort of shaking things up, diversifying things a little bit, bringing a different perspective, and I think the Runaways story is part of what shows that.
Yeah, and I think it kind of leads into the more darker themes of the 80s stories that we get, not just with Teen Titans, but with every comic book company as a whole in that era. You know, the deeper we get into the 80s, the darker things kind of get, for better or for worse. This really is the beginnings of that era. But let's track all the way back to issue 21. We open with a familiar face, Marcy, an unpopular character in both of our eyes, unsanctimoniously getting killed off in the first couple pages because she's on the run from the Church of Blood, which brings us to already our first Titan trope right out the gate, a side character death.
I think that tracks with a lot of what Marv Wolfman is doing. And I guess that could again be the sort of 80s satanic panic kind of ideas of the time, but he's very intrigued by the concept of cults, I would say. We get a fair amount of them. And Brother Blood is sort of that apotheosis of really creating this entire religion, in contrast to the sort of cult-like aspects of Hive and the cult of Trigon.
Yeah, I mean, we really see how deep-seated the Church of Blood is. Kind of weird to notice, when you think of it in a modern setting, this is kind of the Hail Hydra stuff from the MCU. This is very white nationalism, stuff like that. Brother Blood has his hands in everything. He has his hands in media. He has his hands in religion. He has his hands in politics. So to see the Teen Titans go up against him was very interesting. And how do you think this compares to your first introduction of Brother Blood, which was the cartoon?
I mean, it's fairly similar. I think the cartoon tried to keep sort of the bones, as it were. I found the aesthetics very jarring for me, just because it seems almost ridiculous that, he sits on this giant skull throne in this red and black skull costume and then is like, oh yes, I teach tolerance and love. These Titans are harassing me. And I'm I don't.
So that's one thing that will not change, and we will constantly bring up, because this isn't the only interaction the Teen Titans have with Brother Blood, and his costumes don't very much change outside of they're constantly ridiculous. But we'll get into that for Sheikah Week, because I have opinions. So Marcy is killed off after Raven and Starfire have this really cute bonding moment, saving a baseball field. Aren't they called baseball fields? Hi, I'm gay. Are they called baseball fields?
I think field is acceptable. Also stadium or diamond.
Stadium. Jesus Christ. I can't think. So they save a baseball stadium full of people from a bomb, which was really cute and really nice. We're constantly reminded of Marv Wolfman and George Perez's focus on character. And in this moment, while it is something so silly like a bomb in a baseball stadium, it was really cute. And they talk about their differences and how that makes them stronger friends. I really appreciated it.
It's a nice contrast between the two as well. You really get the balance between their personalities and their abilities.
Yeah, definitely. It was cool to see Raven so focused on like the people, and then Starfire so focused on the problem at hand, which was the bomb. It really shows like me, even though their priorities are in two different places, both of those things really mattered in that situation. So Marcy is unsanctimoniously killed. We know this because she interrupts a bonding moment, a reflection moment between Cyborg and Sarah Sims, which was so quick, but I needed it. Like I needed more of it. Mm-hmm. Like for Sarah to be like what we were saying these past couple of volumes, which was like, Cyborg, stop being a dummy. You can just talk to me. It's okay. I'm okay with it. Like,
she's basically outright verbatim saying that, and he's still pulling that classic superhero, no, to protect you, I must not interact with you at all, which we know won't really protect her anyway. But
no, it won't. Luckily, she's spared the rest of the volume because we never see her again. Thankfully, I get scared for side characters now because they just are dropping like flies at this point. We get a lot of sort of complicated topics about what it means to be a superhero in the superhero landscape and what that means for not only the superheroes themselves, but for the people. And a lot of that's featured at Marcy's funeral with her parents and Vic. And again, like the hate to Vic, they were like, oh, if you just died, she wouldn't have fallen into this. And I'm like, sure, but like, what's the hypothetical? Like, I don't understand. I liked the topic at hand way more than the way they were talking about it. Sure, it's kind of a tired trope now, like in this point in our era of comic books, but it was really cool to see like, you know, Cyborg is really reflecting upon like what it means for people in the superhero community to like deal with death and deal with having these lives that are just extraordinary.
I think it was pretty strong overall. It doesn't lean on any painful stereotypes, I don't think. So
thankfully,
it was a great scene in that regard. A flawless Cyborg moment.
So you get Brother Blood's like holy crusade. He kind of lays out his whole plan in this issue of basically making the Teen Titans look like the bad guys. We get a little bit about like the power structure of what the Church of Blood is. So you have Brother Blood, the head patriarch of this cult, but then you have Mother Mayhem, who is like his right-hand woman, this very like Farrah Fawcett looking woman when she's not like adorned head to toe in like a giant robe. And we get our first fight scene because the team inadvertently splits up to infiltrate the Church of Blood, right? So we have our standard looking people who go into the Church of Blood, which is Raven, Wally, Dick, and Donna. And then you have the more people who obviously look like superheroes staying back as to not cause a suspicion, which fails miserably because when our four Titans who infiltrate the base go up against Brother Blood, he seemingly takes everybody out so fast. Almost like Batman levels of intelligence in terms of like knowing what to do to stop these heroes from interacting with him and leaving them all to die.
I thought it was interesting in particular because there is no specific definition applied to Brother Blood yet. And I think it's meant to kind of create a question in the reader's mind of, is he magical? Is he divine? I'm guessing it's probably a power suit, really, but he just kind of trashes the Titans with no explanation of what he can do. He just kind of does it.
It's a lot of like random beams happening and a lot of like, I know you were going to do this, so I did this instead. He has like this weird connection with Raven that they establish in this issue, which is fascinating because that is a long-standing trope within the Titans lore. And right before we get onto issue 22, we think that he basically kills Raven when in fact her soul self left her, leading us into the next issue. In issue 22, it's kind of established through an interview he has with, what was her name? Bethany Snow, what the Church of Blood is, where it came from. We find out that it's from Sandia, that city of terrorists that we were very conflicted about a couple of volumes back.
It's a little on the nose in that sort of mustache twirling villain. I'm going to tell you my whole plan. I'm completely balls to the wall, irredeemably evil. But I mean, that's pulpy and fun, in my opinion. I don't think it's shallow precisely. It's, I don't know, it's a comic.
I think what was interesting to me was the idea that like he's really selling it. Like, he's trying to sell that they're just this peaceful church. No, blood is a good thing. That line where he was like, blood is the life of everything. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't call yourself the Church of Blood. Like, I don't go to the hospital of blood. Like,
wouldn't you be the
what?
Church of Life? Like, just a little more, what's the word? Workshopping on his aesthetic could have really helped.
Yeah, a little bit more like, you can like pacify like how intense you are. Like, you want to like attract people with honey, not with blood. What? So strange. Takes all of the Titans, save for Dick Grayson, that he has defeated, into this torture chamber with this weird spider thing, which was never explained. Grotesque looking as all hell.
George just wanted to draw a monster. He's like,
George
just run with it.
He wanted to draw some strange looking like spider with like 17 different influences. I don't know where they're from. After sending everyone to that torture pit, he has Dick Grayson tortured by somebody named the Confessor, who has his own very special outfit.
His own very evil outfit. And the thing that I found very
evil.
Interesting about the confession, in my opinion, was that it serves no purpose. Dick gives up no information, and Brother Blood is then just like, forget about it. And like, so why did this need to happen? And I kind of feel like why it needed to happen was so that they could show us Dick with his shirt off and some electro play, to be honest. I don't think I'm just because that's what happens. I mean,
literally, it's very strange that he was like, I think he was just in his Speedo for like the whole issue while he's like either being tortured or trying to save all of the Teen Titans respectively that are captured. Like, bare bones. Even back then, Dick Grayson is giving the most like lewdness of the Teen Titans.
And I'm pleased because that means we get equal opportunity exploitation, which is all I ever ask for. But
we have the rest of the Titans who are kind of theorizing what they're going to do and how they're going to basically either get revenge in Cyborg's case, get justice in Beast Boy's case. We get, again, some really cool conversations about like what it means to be a superhero, what it means to do the job of a superhero, which I thought was really interesting. A lot of Cyborg's actions were obviously fueled by anger because Marcy was killed.
Which has a parallel to Starfire, who lost Franklin recently and is still super sore about that. And it's kind of her running commentary the entire time of why do we not kill these villains who kill people that we love?
And Beast Boy's the only one who's like, can we not? Because Starfire and Cyborg are on the same page of like, yeah, they need to like react to justice. Like, they just need to be stopped in any way, shape, or form, even if that means killing him. And Beast Boy's like, no, no, please no. Starfire, Cyborg, and Beast Boy interrupt the interview between Brother Blood and Bethany Snow, kind of causing this media parade, if you will, about painting the Teen Titans as the bad guys. They invaded this person without any due process. They're just attacking mindlessly. They're I think she said they were like animals at some point. Bethany's an awful person, by the way, but the worst. Like, kind of like just the Church of Blood's like, what's her name from Fox News? Pick one of the random blondes from Fox News, and that's Bethany Snow. How did you feel about this very weird like allegory about like media and perception, and very poignant to now? Like, what did you feel about that?
I mean, I think you're right in sort of Fox News parallels. I wonder if perhaps Marv had a specific reporter he felt he had done wrong by, that he wanted to get this sort of polemic against the scheming media out. Again, I do find it though super weird because the whole climate of the US, as I understand it, was all cults, and so it's really weird for him to be like, oh, and here is the cult of blood and we are totally on their side and believe everything they say, because I don't think that would have really been an American media situation. Like, if he had been more of a I'm a mega pastor, that would have gone over fine. But
I think that's why they say church so often and not cult, is like, oh, we're like an organized religion, you can't like religiously persecute us. In Q, I roll here.
I wonder where Scientology lines up too, because they were, you know, gunning for tax exempt status and blackmailing people and stuff in, I believe, this same sort of time period. So I wonder how much that might have been an influence.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some parallels to real life, like religious benefits in certain religions, and not just on like a cult level either. I think it's very fascinating, like how they tapped into this unknowing like I mean, there are documentaries on documentaries about like Scientology and Mormonism and stuff like that. So it's really cool, interesting to see like them tap into that phenomena in a comic book meant for children in the 80s, you know. Amidst the fighting, Brother Blood tries to get away, and Cyborg promptly rips a wing of the plane off, and the plane explodes, making everyone think that Cyborg flat out just killed him, just straight up murdered Brother Blood in the ship as he was trying to escape. Again, there were some like really interesting standouts with Brother Blood's connection to Raven. At one point, she uses her soul self to try to like envelop and incapacitate him, and he just walks through it like nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating because it's never explained. Like you said earlier, we don't ever get a concrete power set of what Brother Blood can do. And I think that's the strongest indicator that there is something actually mystical at play.
Sort of I'll get you next time gadget exit for Brother Blood, and I found that narratively somewhat frustrating that we get him sort of for 2 issues and then suddenly we're slung into the Blackfire saga instead. But it leaves us ready for more, I suppose. And I think the thing that really stands out to Brother Blood for me is Marv credits George with providing Brother Blood's sensuality. And so I'm kind of struck by the number of panels where he's man-spreading and has women splayed out, grasping his thighs, and that very sort of sword and sorcery cover look. And it's neat to me how hard they're going on that idea of the evil patriarch. Like, they aren't necessarily super feminist men themselves, but they get it. They know that he's a bad dude and that the way he has women insubordinated throughout the church is really telling an allegory there, Mother Mayhem included.
And it gets so much worse as the years go on. As somebody who has read the books, the era I was reading, he continues that like ugly patriarchal motif into the early 2000s. But I know what you want to talk about next the most is going to be the Blackfire introduction. And I have some opinions about this story that I don't know if you're going to like, because I have feelings. But that's what we get at the end of issue 22 is a great cliffhanger to Blackfire's introduction into DC Universe proper, not just a story told by Starfire at a camp or at a bonfire.
Yep. I mean, it's the sort of bookend to her campfire story, though, because that's where we really got to see Blackfire. And so this is sort of her popping back up in that epilogue stinger.
Yeah, which was a great cliffhanger. I mean, I wish we could have gotten, like you said, I wish we could have gotten more of Brother Blood and what he is doing. But it's cool that they're sowing the seeds for him to return at least. He doesn't outright die. We know that pretty instantaneously in the book. But now we get like the largest portion of the volume, which is set entirely in space. Issue 23, it's Blackfire pioneering a troop of Gordanians to Earth to recapture Starfire. This all happens while the Teen Titans are dealing with the PR nightmare that was Brother Blood. It's kind of amidst like the DA, who I think his name was Frank Fitzsimmons, or was he Adrian Chase?
Adrian Chase.
I don't know where I got the name Frank Fitzsimmons from. I thought that was someone on the book, but I could be wrong. Don't ask. Adrian Chase, the district attorney of New York at the time, he kind of sequesters the Titans into a room while he's dealing with the onslaught that is the media escapade. Even having a fun like confrontation with Bethany Snow. And I'm just like, get her. I don't root for like the DA or police in most cases when it comes to these storylines. But I was like, yes, I don't like her. She's the worst. But amidst all of that, Starfire loses control of her powers and is kind of like magnetized into the air by the Gordanians is the way I figured it or the way I read it.
I mean, I don't love it entirely. It moves the story along. I would have thought, were I writing it, I think I would have had them capture Dick and make him the damsel in distress to Starfire. I think that's more of a fun inversion, but I mean, it happens. What else?
Yeah. So she's captured again.
Donna goes immediately to her rescue, which I like. They have that friendship angle. They're still playing up with the women, which is awesome.
Yeah. I love that. So we get a nice fight scene between the Titans and the Gordanians themselves as they're trying to rescue Starfire, and a couple of the Titans start to notice the physiology of the Gordanians and how they are incapacitated, which automatically leads to death, which was strange because they just kind of poof like into thin air. And Wally thinks he killed somebody. Raven thinks that she killed somebody in the midst of this fight, which is interesting because this is kind of our first perception of like the heroes don't strive to kill. They strive to incapacitate. They strive to arrest. And it's very noticeable when they think they might have crossed the line, which I love, mind you. I will always stand superheroes not killing people. I don't like it. I think it's tired, especially like in this day and age of what superhero media is.
Like you say, it gives us something interesting in that it has the heroes who are the select ones out of the Titans who very much don't want to cause grievous harm, having to really face the shock of seemingly taking life. I don't think the beat gets quite as much as it should need, maybe, in that case.
It doesn't happen.
It's like a panel of shock and then they get over it. But it is very dramatic in the moment, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. So the Titans are left with basically half a ship and no way to get into space to save Starfire. So they actually contact Aqualad, good old Garth, who you haven't seen yet, but has been a Titans mainstay all throughout the Golden Age, one of the founding members, which is another Titan trope for us that is going to be the Titan cameo, where oftentimes members of the Teen Titans who aren't active still coming to the aid of the team when they're needed, which is one of the most like fun things about the team for me. I know I've talked about how much I like legacy characters, and to bring someone back, even for just half a page, which was this case, he literally pulled a ship out of the sea that was from the Gordanians from when Starfire first arrived on Earth. Even just to see him help out a little bit was nice, and to lament that if he could help, he would have, which is something that commonly happens. This is like your first introduction to Garth, not cartoon withstanding, this in comic books.
Yeah. I mean, it's very brief, but similar to the idea of including the older heroes sort of legitimizes the Titans. I think including the legacy Titans establishes their place in history. I am a big fan of continuity in comics, and I think that's important. And so I think it's nice that Marv takes the time to make these little callbacks and figure out how things can fit together.
Yeah, and it happens so often, and I love it. So they actually get themselves into space. We get a lot of what I love about the interaction between Blackfire and Starfire is how they talk to each other, because you really see like Starfire's means of like, one, first of all, she's hurt that this is happening to her, obviously, but you also get Blackfire's like massive superiority complex, which is like just out and about displayed. She's like, I just want to be better than you. I know I'm better than you. I have to be better than you. And Starfire is just sadly along for the ride, painfully so, because she's tortured and kept in shackles for most of this storyline. But I still found it really interesting. I mean, when we got the story about Blackfire in last volume, it was a lot of like, it was obviously narrated by Starfire, so it was Starfire's perception of the events. This is very much like blanket slate, like you watch as Blackfire unfolds before us and what she actually is like, and it's awful. She's the worst, but in like, not in a fun mustache twirling way, but like she's a sinister villain who poses a serious threat to the team, which we don't often see, especially in this age of comics, because she does not treat the situation lightly with Starfire, with her sister.
She's crazy and needs to go down.
Yeah, just needs to. Just, she doesn't want Starfire to exist in any capacity unless it's like a slow, painful death. We get a lot of Star Wars humor from Beast Boy and other characters here. I wrote it down because it's just like, that's apparently the only space thing that Marv and George knew. There was like maybe one or two Star Trek quotes in here, but it was just all, especially from Beast Boy, he makes like 3 or 4 references to Luke Skywalker in like 2 issues, and I'm like, okay, Beast Boy. The pop culture references were kind of cute when we first got introduced to these characters, but I'm very tired of it. Can you
refrain? On a little thick. I also feel like there's a very heavy parallel to, it's not technically called the Phoenix Saga, but the original Phoenix arc in Marvel Comics, I think, has some similarities here, especially once we get into Zahal as the embodied goddess. I felt like there was some resonance of the original M'Kraan Crystal story.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we do get a random bunch of side characters that I care nothing for.
Yeah, the U-Men are useless, but they are very equivalent to the Starjammers narratively.
But they're not as cool. Okay. Anyways, before I get to issue 24, we get an interaction where the Teen Titans make it to space. They make it to Blackfire, and they're thrust out of space, or thrust into space, alien style. And you think, well, they think they're dead. I use big air quotes there. But they're actually rescued by Superman, which I thought was really cool. And I was really excited. I was like, oh my God, is this like a JLA Teen Titans moment where like they're going to go rescue Starfire together? I thought that would have been pretty neat, seeing as the only time they've interacted before this and after this is just them fighting. No, at the end of the issue, Superman explains, I'm half depowered for some reason. I don't know what the story of that is at this point in the comics, because I'd never read, I mean, I read stuff from my era of comics growing up, so I never knew the backstory of what Superman was going through in the 80s. So apparently he's depowered somehow halfway. He's like, I'm half the Kryptonian I used to be. I'm like, great, cool. So who's going to help them?
For one thing, but
honestly, that's way more than I could ever do. You could lift half a car. I can't lift the 30-pound weight without my knees being mad at me. Like, what? Come on. So instead, he gives their aid to the Omega Men, and that's the end of the issue. Like, I'm supposed to be excited about who these characters are.
They're very lackluster. Especially to have the tease of like, you think Superman will be there, and then it's like, nope, I can't meet these guys.
Meet these guys who I've never heard of. I literally, as I was reading, had to like do a mini deep dive into who the Omega Men were. They ain't nobody that special. Like you said, I think they're like the Starjammers, but just not as cool and not.
I also feel there may be some Guardians parallels, especially when there's the dude who's like, "Hi, I'm Brute," and I'm like, what did you say?
Did you put a G in there? Like, it was very strange. I wrote on the list of names, and it's like, who made these characters? They're existing. Let that be known too. Like, George and Marv didn't make these characters. I made sure to like look into their introductions. Their introductions was in Green Lantern. So they're not mainstays of Titans lore. They're just random superheroes who are really into taking down the Citadel homeworld planet that Starfire and Blackfire often interact with. So it is a lot of spacefaring stuff. I get why they're there and why they want to help, but they ultimately don't do a lot besides talk, which leads us into issue 24. Issue 24 is basically split into, when it's not Blackfire and Starfire fighting or talking, it's the Omega Men trying to find them and talking and talking and talking. And I'm so over it. We get the first introduction of the Citadel homeworld. It was mentioned back when Starfire was explaining her origins, but we see it in its glory. And I kind of love the design. It's this planet encapsulated with other little like asteroid planets around it. Very creative, in my opinion. Once again, like archaeology, it just comes so easy to George Perez when he's drawing that, like, I loved the outside of it. I didn't want them on it, but I really liked how it looked aesthetically.
It does have a lot of sort of the fun, trippy space stuff. I think it drags because of the Omega Men. I mean, especially because, as I understand it, this was like Titans were DC's most popular properties. So if anything, they were trying to give the Omega Men a leg up by appearing in Titans, I would say. But why do that to the Titans? Just ill-advised.
Yeah, I mean, if they had something else to do, if they were a little bit more distinct with like how they looked, because even their costumes are kind of meh. Like, the dude was like he had not a space mullet, but he had like really long hair and red on, and I'm like, nothing fancy here. There's nothing. You don't look as cool as what's his name from the Starjammers.
I mean, I give him points for like the open chest thing, but
yeah. Blackfire arrives on the Citadel homeworld, run by Lord Damon with a Y. This strange, like, globulous blue creature who doesn't know how to speak. He reminded me of, I'm watching Superman the animated series, and he reminds me of how Bizarro talks.
Okay.
That's how I read it, was like, me am this, me do that. And I'm like, oh, this is going to get tired fast, because apparently all of the people in his race talk like that.
Like, why are they so dumb but in charge?
Like, the minute Blackfire was like, I'm going to kill him, I'm like, yeah, please do. please just end it now. I don't want this character here. Because that's her whole plan on a grand scale, is to amass this power to rule the Citadel homeworld and kind of like start taking over the galaxy in a way. But what takes precedent is her sister and the revenge against her sister for being better than her. Amidst all of that, the Omega Men with the Titans are introduced to this guy named Oron, who looks a lot like the main guy. I almost got confused for a minute that who's the main guy for the Omega Men? Is it Nimbus? Or is it Primus?
Primus, that's the one.
His names. Okay, so Primus. Oron comes into play on the same ship that the Omega Men are with the Titans to tell them that like everything's about to blow up, the world's about to end because Exalt is in danger. For people who are reading along, Exalt is the name of the goddess that Starfire will constantly yell or talk about when she's talking about her homeworld. It's the goddess that they worship, essentially. But Oron, why is he here? Besides telling us that Exalt is in danger, which means the whole world is in danger. It's just so tacked on. He literally like walked from a corner of the ship to be like, everything's bad. But I like at least the explanation of like Exalt and who she was, but we don't get that until the next issue. I was just so annoyed. I'm like, can I just get more Blackfire, please? I can't deal with this Omega Men stuff.
I get confused. Is the Citadel different from Okara?
Yeah, I think so. Okara is the warrior planet where Exalt is contained. Yes. Citadel homeworld is the
blue dude,
weird planet with planets around it that Lord Damon rules over.
Gotcha. And then they start attacking Okara because they intend to apprehend Exalt and use her as a sort of super weapon.
Yes, this woman goddess literally becomes not a Deus Ex Machina. She becomes a plot device, essentially.
So powerful she can't be controlled, which is where I start to get the Phoenix vibes, I would say, as well.
Do you know if this came out before the Phoenix saga or after?
I think Phoenix was on the cusp of the 80s, I want to say. So just a little bit before, if I'm correct.
And is that George? That's not George. No, it's Chris Claremont, right?
Yes.
Yes.
It would have been 1984 for the Phoenix, it looks like, I think. So actually a year after this, that can't be right. No.
Oh. Either that or they came out probably around the same time. Which is weird in comics. That often happens. The weird like parallel storylines on different company ends. Like, it was like Death of Batman and Death of Captain America happened like the same year.
Here we go. The Unicron saga starts in October 1976. So yeah, Unicron came out, and then I feel like this is kind of influenced by it a bit.
Okay, places. For sure. I guess this is not a common staple for Beast Boy, but this is like a resounding moment for him. So much so that they made a HeroClix of it. That he disguises himself as the aliens, the Gordanians, is immediately found out that he's not a Gordanian. Right as the war between Exalt, or the war over Exalt, begins. And that leads us into issue 25. Holy crap, issue 24 was a lot. So issue 25 happens. We have the war going on Okara. I wrote in my notes, too many characters, because there's literally too many. I'm like, I don't care about these people. I have the Omega Men written for Sheikah Week, but I almost want to do just like them as a whole and not even go through the characters. Can we please just do that? Because I don't want to. Sure. I don't want to deal with them other than what we deal with now. So the boys, however, have snuck onto the Citadel. Amidst all of this, that leaves Raven, Wally, Donna in the midst of this war. And Raven is not taking it well. She is just overwhelmed with emotion, and the tides of war like kind of overcome her.
It's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of sort of light effects, things exploding and glowing all over the page. So that has an emotional resonance with Raven. She gets overwhelmed by all of the pain and the violence around her, and it gives her sort of the heroic blue screen of death where she can't handle it and shuts down. And then we get a counterpart to that with Zahal also being this person capable of being overloaded beyond their endurance, which I guess also is happening to Starfire at the same time, because Blackfire is torturing the hell out of her, along with the single Scion, who is normally an enemy to the Citadel, but we do have one here in that too many characters note. We have so many alien species to keep track of.
Honestly, if it wasn't the Omega Men, it would be so much easier to just withstand. Honestly, if you had just Auron there, it would have been fine.
Like, what's the name of the snake Omega woman? Demonia or something?
Demonia. Mm-hmm.
She has a random attempt to double cross people, but it doesn't actually work. So I'm like, why was this even here?
And it doesn't register because everyone's like, she's gonna betray us, and then she betrays us. Why? Just so many whys. I mean, the interaction she has with Beast Boy, where like they kind of both shapeshift together, because apparently she could do that, was cute. But like, other than that, she had no real importance to the story. Exalt kind of pleads to the Citadel to stop fighting amidst Demonia's, I put obvious betrayal in my notes. Robin sees Starfire in trouble, and that beckons him to fight more, and kind of realize his true emotions for her. Cyborg has Damon in this chokehold, and he's like, you need to stop, or I will kill your king or lord or whatever have you. And Blackfire's like, okay, bro, and then kills him herself because she planned on doing it anyway. This gives them Starfire, and they literally just want to leave, which I thought was strange. They were like, we're going to go. You can do whatever the heck you're doing on this planet. We just want to go back to Earth and like not deal with you. But Blackfire has other plans. She basically wants to kill and wipe out Tamaran and make Starfire watch. And that's where we leave the issue before Titans Annual #1.
It's a breathless page turner in the way it's constructed, but we do get it's not the start, it is the confirmation of the Dick Corey romance, that he's really starting to understand he has these feelings for her. And so as this storyline, when she's deeply injured and he's sort of freaking out, and then he gets very violent himself, it's what causes him to have to admit to himself, oh wait, I love Corey. And so I'm all about that, because of course Nightfire is my ship. And in terms of like the Sisters at War isn't necessarily what I would love, but it's got meat. I'm excited to see it in Titans doing the same thing. It's super cool to see the production stills with the costume that's so very, very close to this Blackfire costume coming to life.
I have different opinions on that. On that show that plagues my nightmares.
Production design level, not
on a design level. On a design level, I like a lot of their costumes. I remember when, just a quick diversion, I remember when they premiered the Hawk and Dove costumes, and I'm like, wow, that has no right to look that good. And then I saw Hawk rip someone's throat out, and I'm like, I can skip this. Anyways, back to the next issue is Titans Annual #1, which was really weird to see that this was the next issue. I like kept reading in my app, the DC Universe app or DC Infinite app. They put Titans Annual #1 into the chronological order. Okay. A lot of times the annuals are separate. So I was very confused. I read it as if it was Titans 26, and then was like looking for Titans Annual #1. And I'm like, wait a minute, I read this already, but it's actually, they just put it in order. And for Titans Annual to be the ending of the story was strange. At least for me, when I was reading comic books so prevalently, annuals were like one-off stories. Annuals weren't so important to the chronological story at hand as much as this is, because this is the ending of the story. This is the ending of the Blackfire Starfire saga. I think this one is the most Blackfire and Starfire heavy. Thank God.
I mean, I think it's awesome that they get to sort of own the annual in that way. We get to actually see Tamaran. We actually get to see a resolution to the Blackfire Starfire conflict. We get to see Corey meet her family. We get background on what Zal is and how she works. So I think it's a really cool issue. I
Yeah.
liked it a lot. Just need to cut out the Omega Man and it would be perfect.
Yeah, literally, you could just cut out the Omega Man and it would be grand. It would be so much more like just light. It's not so heavy. Especially since they don't even go into like any of their backstories whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, we are the Omega Men. We hate the Citadel. Okay, great, cool.
Yeah.
That's
Wally ends up flying the ship for them because his super speed makes him better at it. So again, why are they there?
why are they there? We get another moment where Beast Boy's almost dead in this issue, which like I don't know if I have to like pull out the mid 2000s reference and call him Kenny from South Park, but like that's what it feels like. They're like, oh my god, Beast Boy's almost dead, and I'm like, he's not dead. And then he shows up like 2 pages later talking about how he became an itsy bitsy spider, and I'm like, there was no need for him to almost die. We get Exal's backstory, which I really liked. I thought that was the most captivating stuff outside of the Blackfire Starfire stuff, is the full explanation of who Exal is. When I was reading, is they never really explained anything about Exal. This is hardly ever talked about, but I feel like there's so much rich stuff here that you could go back to in terms of who Exal was as not only a warrior, but as an entity in and of it herself, because she fought in this like 100-year war or something, and then ends up getting killed after winning the war, and then brought back. But when she's brought back with these like enormous like galaxy ending powers, and is worshipped as a goddess. Which is so cool to me that like, I know I had said it previous volume when they were talking about it at the campfire, but I love that like the story is really centered on like a female centric god being. Like it's not a male, it's a female, and the inherent like coolness of that, because we don't see that often, especially in like normal mythology or like normal religion. The woman being the head of anything is so unheard of, and in here it's just so plain as day. Like Exal is the goddess. There's no one else trying to usurp her. There isn't a man trying to delegitimize her. It is just goddess, which I really liked. How did you feel about Scion basically proclaiming that even though Starfire and Blackfire have been fighting this whole time, now they're going to have a final battle to kind of decide who wins, who lives, who gets to rule Okara, and who gets to watch Tamaran die? How did that whole conflict unfold for you?
I mean, I think it's a great way to raise the stakes. It's not super logical, but it fits in with how Starfire's story has been told, with these very sort of grand ultimatum: you must leave this planet, you must be a slave, so on and so forth. And in that regard, it's a way for Corey to really sort of full circle it back to revenge on her sister for everything that Blackfire has done, not only to her, but to their whole planet. She betrayed Tamaran out of her, should use the names, Commander betrayed Tamaran out of her desire for revenge against Corey for being able to fly when she had that congenital illness that meant she couldn't, which meant she couldn't inherit, which gave her this whole bizarre complex of I hate everyone, which again, maybe she wouldn't if they were nicer to her about her disability, but
I mean, at some point she just ran with it. At some point she's just like, full villain, check please, that is me, I am she. I really enjoyed all of the fight scenes between the two, especially like when it's like the final battle. Like the way George and Marv come up with ways for them to fight, not just hand to hand, but in the air and then in the water. Like all of that stuff was really fun to watch unfold. I praised the artwork almost every volume, and I will continue to do so. Like the artwork is just without a doubt one of the key moments for these issues, when Blackfire was like holding on to Starfire for dear life because she cannot fly, and like the ways they showed them flying through the air and like fighting in the air, phenomenal work. It's just stunning. I can't get over it. We get the fun little moment in the Titans annual with Demonia and Beast Boy, because the only reason that's relevant is because they save Cyborg and Robin, who were like critically injured in the war battle. And right before that, or right after that, we get the seemingly death of Blackfire, because apparently their powers are like extremely amplified in water, like electricity, which I didn't know until this issue that happens. But it seemingly kills Blackfire, triggers the explosion, destruction of, I don't think it was Citadel, or because Scion had like put explosives everywhere apparently, and then it triggered the explosion, but I couldn't tell if it was Okara. They didn't really ever show Okara as a defined planet. Like, so I didn't know if that was Okara or if that was Citadel. Do you know?
It was Okara and Tamaran that had the bombs, I would say.
Okay.
Because then she, should use names, Zal kind of goes supernova in a way, removing the bombs.
Yes, I remember that.
Since those are sort of her home planets versus the Citadel is the invading force, right?
Yeah. So Zal sacrifices herself as a goddess to save Tamaran and Okara and kind of rescue everyone in place, which gives us the nice reintroduction of Starfire's family and all of Tamaran to get Ryander's first appearance, not just mentioned, but he actually has speaking lines, and that's really cool.
His tiny little Speedo I should cosplay sometime.
I mean, I feel like it's already somewhere on your list, no?
It's pretty close to the original Corey gender bend that I did, which I appreciate. It's, again, that sort of equal opportunity exploitation. They weren't like, oh, here's Starfire's brother, head to toe armor. They were like, oh, here's Starfire's brother. He wears a collar and a Speedo. What?
Yeah.
But
literally, I mean, that was my biggest problem when I was reading books when they assigned the first Star Sapphire male. And he's like, you said, like head to toe in armor, and it makes literally no sense and is really annoying because I'm just like, why? God forbid they show skin. Like, what? But here it's so normalized. Ryander is just Ryander. He happens to be in a Speedo. And it's not like the older generation of Tamranians aren't so like risque or whatever, but it makes sense for the culture that they have. Like, it isn't out of this world. Like, it isn't, they never expressly say, like, none of the Teen Titans either. Like, none of them even bring up, like, why is Ryander is naked? Like, it's literally just the fact that Ryander is in normal Tamaranian garb, you know?
It's their culture.
And that gives us the end of the Starfire and Blackfire saga, right before we get to the very special episodes, as you coined it. Overall, before we get into those two issues, what are your like final thoughts in terms of the Tamaranian stuff, all of it, kind of encapsulated into like a conclusion?
I mean, I like it a lot. It's a strong Starfire chapter. It lets us resolve a lot of her backstory. It does still include the idea that the old Citadel law war treaty thing is effect, where she is still technically banished from Tamaran. So she does still have to leave. And I think that provides a really sweet ending, in that I think it's Donna who specifically points it out, well, you can't be with your family, but on Earth, we're your family. And I thought that was a very sweet way to end it.
It was, and I was so glad. Which brings us into issue 26. These next two issues are going to be a lot heavier in retrospect in terms of subject matter, just because it is with real world issues. I say that as if we experienced them, but we didn't, because this was set in the 80s. So it was a different time. I didn't do any research about like what was actually going on in the 80s in New York, in particular with the like narcotic situation or the youth displacement situation. So a lot of this I took as not necessarily as fact, because obviously it's a comic book, but I took it very in a fascinating way that like on some level there is some truth to this, that this actually happened, which was really sad. What I'm actually talking about is the next two issues, 26 and 27, are all about teen runaways who go to New York in search of a better life for whatever reason, and end up getting involved in a lot of like illegal activity. There's a lot of like prostitution talked here without saying it is. There's a lot of drug use here without saying it is. They like
I think it's pretty blatant on the drug use. I feel like it was also very blatant about prostitution, more so than I think we are even in a lot of comics today. They were just like, yeah, and the girls and boys will sell themselves for anything. Like, well, that's a lot. This did not hit the same when I was a child.
I mean it in the sense of like they're not explicitly saying it. Like they're using like words. They still have to follow that stupid code. So they can't outright say like hookers. They can't outright say prostitutes. But they could say like selling themselves. Or one of the guy who gets killed by the car, he mentioned like there's bugs everywhere. okay, he was obviously on drugs. They just can't say it. You know what I mean? A lot of it is coded in a very like blatant way because we know what they're talking about. But this opens up really nicely. I think you're going to love because it talks about Dick and Corey kind of like expressing their feelings for each other, not necessarily cementing a relationship, although I think Starfire would have already done that. She was very ready in the conversation.
Dick has inherited Bruce's emotional constipation and is, although he's admitting his feelings, still not 100% ready to act on them, is I guess how I'd put it.
Which was really cute. And I really liked it. And I'm like, oh my God, we're one step closer to like them being official. That's on the spaceship on the way home, where we get a nice epilogue and prologue to this issue about like everything going on with the teenagers. I don't want to say there's too many characters in the sense of not like the Omega Men, but like there's so many character names. I'm not going to remember them all. I had to like start writing them down because the prologue and epilogue are just about teenagers who run away for whichever reason. It's like one line of panels talking about why they ran away to New York. After that, we get Dick and Corey on a date. He does comment that it's kind of weird they're going to a Broadway play because like he knows and we know Bruce's parents went there and then bad stuff happened. So obviously that kind of triggers an emotional response. They notice Adrian Chase, the district attorney we saw previously, and a runaway, one of the ones we saw in the prologue, basically tries to rob these people at a Broadway show and ask them to stop the bugs all over. And basically he's overdosing on this, whatever drug it would be. And Adrian Chase kind of like holds his own against him because the teenager runs at him with a knife and he like easily stops it. Like, I didn't Google Adrian Chase as a character, so I don't know who he becomes or if he becomes anybody. So I might not even do it just to see. But it was interesting to see them kind of like, even Dick Grayson was like, oh, see, I don't have to be a superhero all the time. Sometimes people can like solve problems for themselves. Unfortunately, that's immediately thrown out the window because the drugged up teenager gets hit by a car and dies. And it was so sad. Because I mean, at least for me, I felt nothing but remorse for the guy because he's like drugged the fuck up.
It's a little conflicting because, for example, if Dick hadn't had that weird "no, we should stand back and let people take care of it themselves" thing, they could have saved him. For one thing, just there's a tension. They aren't entirely callous about it, but they aren't entirely compassionate about it. Like he refers to something like, we should get out of this city, it's full of animals. And I'm like, but that was a child who just died in the street. Like,
it was so sad. At least I was like, oh no, this is going to be a weird story. And I know that the Teen Titans has dealt with drug use before, so I knew it was coming at some point, but like it's just here. It's like blatant, like we went from like crazy space galaxy adventures to teenagers who are actively drug users. So it's quite the tonal shift.
I found a quick sociology article for us. It says that New York City homelessness exploded in the 1980s due to 4 interrelated factors: declining personal incomes, loss of affordable housing, deep cuts in welfare programs, and a growing number of people facing personal problems that left them at high risk for homelessness. So this is all Wally's fault for being a political conservative.
No. Oh no. I love that was a cut, but that was great. You segued into that insult so nicely. I was going to blame everything on Reagan, but you did it. You got it.
Also Reagan. But
also Reagan.
Having Wally be a proud conservative in the Reagan era does kind of make me dislike him intensely.
Oh, yeah. By far. I mean, I think when he had his like letter issue, I think he learned a little bit. And he does grow up to be a lot better. But teenage Wally is insufferable on many, many facets. But who's not insufferable, at least to me, is Terra. And this is our first introduction to her. And I was overjoyed because I didn't even see this coming. I don't remember when she came into the story in terms of like numbered issues. I have the Judas Contract collected as a graphic novel, but that kind of just picks and chooses issues that all collect into her story. So I didn't even realize that this was the issue she first appears in, trying to take over the Statue of Liberty, which was weird.
It's
in her
always the Statue of
headpiece.
Liberty. And the Galactus headpiece threw me. I didn't recognize it at Terra at first because of the mask. I'm like, who the hell is this? But
Oh, it's Terra, and she's here, and she's my fave. She's problematic as fuck, but I love her. I love the legacy that she kind of has through the years. Definitely some of the most contrived, nonsensical stuff.
it's a
But
very
she's
weird
great.
introduction because she's like, I'm here to destroy the Statue of Liberty. But then Wally shows up and she's like, oh, I guess I should get out of here. And then the police start firing on her without her actually doing anything.
She literally just flew around the Statue of Liberty professing she was going to destroy it. And then Beast Boy shows up, which is cool that it's Beast Boy versus her because we get the longstanding romance on again, off again interactions. And then she just decides to leave. She's just like, nah, okay, it's not worth it. I don't want to deal with it. Yeah. She just fully checked out and leaves. And that's all we get of her until I think issue 28 is where we get her proper introduction as a character, which I'm excited for. And I cannot wait because the Judas Contract is not my favorite storyline of hers, but it's arguably her most iconic. And I had a very strong connection to her in the show. So we're getting to like my bread and butter. Besides like Donna Troy's, Terra is like it for me. Beyond that, beyond her quick introduction, we get like some like tragic stuff with Raven and her connection to this character, Lizzie Angelo, who's pregnant, who is a prostitute. They just don't say the word. Because Lizzie, through all this trauma that she's endured, like her dad kicked her out because she's pregnant. She's now forced to be a prostitute by this guy, Rondo. She still has hope. And Raven uses her empathic powers on her and feels that hope for a brief moment and smiles, even though they don't show it. I was like, why don't you show her? You could show her smile. I want to see her smile more often in terms of like, that's the thing she's not supposed to do. Like she's not supposed to show emotion or feel emotion. So rather than get a thought bubble about, oh, this made me smile, I would rather see it. I would rather see her smile. Because I think, it was a touching moment in that instance, but it would have been so much better to see it. But a really tragic connection with this character who just goes through the ringer, man. Like, Raven is dealing with her own control issues ever since the war on Okara. We get, I guess, a classic text bubble from Trigon through her saying that he is like ever closer to coming back, which means Arella's not doing her job, but I digress. You had one job, Arella, one job. We get a lot of the stuff about like New York politics at the time, what New York was like in terms of homelessness. Cool that you brought up that sociology article because that adds so much more weight to like what we're reading, that it was really this bad for so many youths of the time. There is a runaway who is the brother of the car crash victim at the beginning of this issue, basically trying to be a vigilante and like trying to how do I put this? Trying to stop all of the stuff happening to the homelessness. Meanwhile, the Teen Titans are trying their best to figure out what's happening. And the end of the issue sees him being shot and almost killed by the gangster Anthony Scarpelli and his goons, which leads us into issue 27. So how do you reflect on all of that? I mean, issue 26 is a heavy issue, 27 arguably heavier.
I mean, it's kind of pitting the Titans against a problem they cannot overcome. It's a systemic issue. I think there's very interesting stuff going on with Adrian Chase in that he's the DA and yet he's the character who's kind of outright saying to the Titans, well, maybe the law can't handle this and maybe we need to go around the law. And I'm like, sir, that's not your job. Why are you lecturing the Titans on their need to be lawless? But interesting to see how that goes.
Especially to somebody in a position of power like the DA, you have the power to change things on such a level, like to an extent. I'm pretty sure, and I'm not like a law expert, I'm not somebody who's well knowledged in the power that like certain members of the police have, but like as a district attorney, you should have more power to get change done faster, to my base knowledge of it. So for him to like tell the Teen Titans like openly like actively be vigilantes when I'm so used to the trope of the policeman being like, stop superheroes, let us do our job, it was, like you said, very jarring to see. But this brings us into issue 27. We kind of get the notion that Raven's empathy powers have a limit. They don't outright say that, but she's taken on so much emotion and helped out so many people that it's taking its toll on her. And this is where we get the Trigun's voice word bubble, because it's always like outlined in red.
Yep. Only for now, daughter. Only for now.
Only for now. And only for 300 times you come back. We get the reason Wally's not here is because he has homework, which was strange. Arguably, if Raven's in need, I would suspect him to be here, because they like kind of professed their love for each other a couple issues ago, but they didn't. Their relationship is so much more rocky than like Dick and Corey that I just don't want it. I don't want it anywhere. I don't want, at least this incarnation of Raven to me is so just like, I have to be this blank slate. I have to like keep my emotions in check, because it does have a cost, which we see here, that like when they were talking about their love for each other, I'm just like, guys, stop. Like, cut it. Trigun's like in the back of her head being like, yes, be teenagers, you know, stop. But his absence paves the way for Roy Harper to enter the fray, another Golden Age Teen Titan that I'm very excited to see. Roy Harper is most commonly known as Red Arrow now. Back in the day, he goes by Speedy, a moniker that has its own tradition in Titans lore, which is really cool. As a government liaison for Adrian Chase, which I thought was the silliest excuse for him to be here. He could just live in New York and want to help the Titans. Yeah. He doesn't need to be governmentally contracted to help this federal problem. It was very strange to me.
I don't know that he makes an incredibly strong impression in the issue overall. It's kind of just like, hey, here he is. But there is that continuity aspect and the bringing the Titans together. So it's good to see him. I do sort of wonder if Roy, or I'm getting name overload, Wally has to sit out because there's a limit on the number of redheaded dudes they're allowed to have in one issue.
Mind you, Terry has not been anywhere. He was mentioned once this whole volume, just once. They must have a limit on how many redheads are allowed in a comic book. We get Raven telling Lizzie, like, you have to leave. You can, like, try to return to your dad and try to, like, assuage the issues you guys have. Which, like, Raven, you're not advised in, like, American social dynamics when it comes to, like, underage pregnancy. Why are you telling this little girl to go back to her dad? I feel like there are some other alternatives that I would have said, but Raven wasn't in a position to tell her how to handle her life, in my opinion, at least. But that's what she does. And Lizzie, at the bus stop, on her way to go back home, is apprehended by Rondo, her pimp, essentially. Leads her back to Scarpelli, who has this massive drug ring plan where, like, all the teenagers are supposed to do is drop off drugs at a certain point. But, like, you know, that's not all they're doing. Like, literally, one of them was killed in a car crash. Scarpelli, you are not, like, you're not scotch-free of judgment because you're just telling these teenagers to drop off drugs. Like, your facets of illegalness extend more than just aiding and abetting. Like, what is wrong with you? You gross human being. But this is where the conflict with him and the Teen Titans amps up the most, and we get Speedy in his full outfit. It's his Golden Age outfit. I think I wanted the shift into more modern costumes to be a lot faster than it's happening, because we get both Aqualad and Speedy sporting their classic Golden Age costumes. I wonder if it's when Dick Grayson Robin shifts into Nightwing, spoiler alert, that we actually see that transition of these Golden Age heroes kind of upgrading their outfits. But for now, we get the Golden Age ones.
It has a lot of action again. We have Starfire tearing completely through a ship, which maybe was a bit drastic. It maybe proves more challenging for the Titans than I think makes sense, considering they're up against random gangsters in this case.
That was a common thing I was thinking of while reading the fight scenes. I'm like, Donna can take out 3 of these thugs easy with like a finger. Why do I need these sprawling scenes of her fighting one gangster? I love them. They're great artwork, but I don't need it because she can literally wrangle them all up with her lasso in 2 seconds flat. Or Raven can just teleport them somewhere else. Like, we've seen them apprehend humans before so easily that this was this was definitely a shift. I do think that the fact that kids were in danger kind of amps up the tension, especially when at the end of the issue, one of the child runaways was just flat out killed, like in Cyborg's arms, just dead.
Several of them. It's a very tragic end. They kill off, I think, at least 3 in this battle.
Yeah, I think one of them's the gangster who was gonna shoot somebody, and then one of the runaways like slit his throat, but you didn't see it happen. And then he says some quote from, hold on one second. He says a quote that like really stuck with me, and I was like, what is that from?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Yeah, is that from fucking oh my god, what's the name of him? He wears the cardigan.
Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Rogers. That's literally Mr. Rogers. That's the song he sings. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, which was dark.
Yeah.
He literally slits somebody's throat and then quotes Mr. Rogers. I'm sorry, that was weird. It was jarring, especially since I didn't know what the quote was, but I kind of like felt like I knew what it was. And I was just like, this is entirely morbid and so sad, because like we see so many, like the pink-haired dude, I'm not gonna know names, there's too many names here. The pink-haired dude like casually just expresses nothing but greed and is shot down by a gangster. The other runaway, Lopez, who was beat up to where he's bloody, slits the guy's throat like we saw in quotes Mr. Rogers. And then the stripe-haired child is just shot and gunned down in Cyborg's arms. And it's so sad that you think Cyborg, while he was talking so much game earlier about, you know, retroactive justice and doing the same thing to the villains as the heroes, in a surprising twist, doesn't do that. He actually just throws the dude into the river. Chase asks him if he killed him, and he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I thought that was a very nice parallel from the beginning of the volume to the end, where Cyborg is like kind of more leaning towards Beast Boy's mentality of like not killing, even though the dude definitely deserved it. You know what I mean?
I found it very unsatisfying in its resolution, which I suppose is intentional, but for example, Lizzie goes back to her dad, and the resolution is she has the door slammed in her face, which I was
it's so sad.
That was not where I thought that was going. I thought it was supposed to be, you know, whole dad, I'm sorry, can't we agree we had problems but get along? And they were like, no, 2 out of 3 runaways remain homeless, which it's a very strange ending in that regard. I guess it's a cautionary tale, I would put it as. Like, I think very much Marv was not necessarily in the mind of we need social programs to save people from economic downturn. He was more like, you're making bad decisions, don't. But I don't think that stands the test of time.
No, especially like the epilogue, the last words of the issue are, and so it goes. And I'm like, can it not though? Like, we can change that. Like, we are a society of ever-changing beings. It doesn't need to just go on. Like, I was profoundly affected by like all the tragicness of this last issue, and for it to end on like, and so it goes. I'm like, can it not? Can't we
Especially
change?
because Cyborg had brought them to the homeless shelter. I would think rather than showing how people can't be reintegrated to their families, then the correct ending is to show how they at least have some network in the shelter. Maybe that's not very realistic.
I don't know. It was a crazy end to a crazy ride of like, so much happens. Holy smokes. And then I think we get the beginnings of the Judas contract next issue, which I'm really excited about. I don't specifically know the tenure that Terra has on the team before she betrays them. Spoiler alert, it's like her entire character for the people who are watching. But at least for now, like, I'm very excited to see where the story goes again and again and again. Which brings us to Sheikah Week, because we are done with this volume. Again, a very kind of small list. I'm going to summarize the Omega Men into just them as a group, because I'm not going through all those dumb costumes together. We ain't going to do it. We'd be here forever. There's like, I thought
don't think I would consider any of them chic. So yeah,
No.
collective week.
I wrote down like the first 4 names, and then they just kept adding names of people, and I'm like, I'm not doing this. No,
At
it's
least
just a
2 of
group
them,
of
their
people.
costume is pants and being kind of an animal furry creature. Like Tigron is a tiger man who wears Hulk pants, and Harpus is a
She's just a harpy.
pterodactyl creature that just wears Hulk pants. I mean, they weren't the best outing for whoever designed them.
No. So we can start with the Omega Man, I guess, and we can just resoundingly give them a week. I looked up iterations of them that have come back more closer to like nowadays, modern times. Still not impressed. Still not like, I never thought I could be so surprised by a faction of the DC universe existing without my knowledge, because I've never heard of these people before, like ever. And I'm not impressed. So I constitute like weak on the board for all of them. We get 2 Golden Age costumes for the good guys. We get Aqualad in his Speedo and long sleeve shirt and boots. How do we feel about that?
I say weak for the Golden Ages. They belong
For both
in the
him
Golden
and
Age.
Speedy?
I mean,
no.
Speedy. I guess there's a timelessness to the Robin Hood thing, but Aqualad's costume is just a mistake.
It'll be very interesting when we do a Golden Age retrospective, because I will relish in what will be your opinions on the Golden Age costumes as a whole, because I have certain opinions, but I patiently wait in anticipation of what you have to say about them based off of your critique of Aqualad and Speedy. For me, I think I'll give the, because I know the costumes that Aqualad gets, and they get so good. And they've tried revisiting this before. They literally revisited the same color scheme for the Titans show. I know that. And that's influencing my decision. So I'm probably just going to give it a week. Speedy, however, I love red on Speedy. He does get the moniker Red Arrow for a reason. And the Golden Age allusions to like Robin Hood with him and Green Arrow are really fun. The dichotomy between red and green really works nicely. I'll give it a chic for me. We do get Exal in all her goddess glory. And I love it, as she's an ethereal golden being adorned with like fun necklaces and jewelry and flowy clothes. So it kind of hits like all of my sweet spots when it comes to costume design.
I enjoy the space goddess look. I think it becomes weak when we cut back to her human days and it turns out she was just a blonde white lady in armor.
Yeah, I was very much like, what? That's what she looked like? No. Golden Exile, definite cheek. Like, amazing. We don't even need to talk about human Exile. She doesn't. No. That gives us to the villains of the volume. We don't need to go through Blackfire again because we did talk about her look extensively and nothing's really changed. She's still sporting the eyebrows. We do get Brother Blood's first introduction. And what do you think before I give my take?
I don't think that it works. I don't think it's a particularly strong, intimidating evil outfit. I've already said I don't really think it makes sense for him to be in a quote evil outfit. I would have gone a whole other direction, in my opinion.
Especially given the narrative structure of who he is as a character. I would much rather get like weird suit and tie Brother Blood in this instance.
I would say an all-white suit would be what I would have expected to start out. Maybe he wears something
fetish
different
gear and like skull helmet, and it's always going to be a week, and my boyfriend will chastise me for saying that. I don't like Brother Blood's outfits most ever. I will rue the day when I get his headpiece in DC Universe Online because I will never wear it. His acolytes, the Church of Blood, I thought Mother Mayhem looked stunning in that like sleek black with a red collar look and the Farrah Fawcett hair.
Like sex nuns in a way. It's sort of a Catholic habit, but a little more revealing and a little spicier.
I'm for it. Anything that like subverts religious standards, I'm very here for. So I'm going to give that a chic.
I'll allow it, sure.
And then that brings us to Terra. What do you think of the Galactus adorned, inspired outfit?
I don't side on the Kirby headpiece in this case. I can understand the love for a wacky headpiece, but especially for Terra, I don't think it fits, other than maybe emphasizing the idea that she's a villain in this context, and thus she wears a wacky headpiece for that. I think she loses it very quickly.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's there in the next issue. No, it's there. That headpiece is there. It's not as big, but it's there.
I think I'm gonna. Yeah, the color scheme doesn't really do it for me either. I guess brown and orange is earthy, but I say weak.
I will unfortunately have to give it a week. I know that's astounding given my love for the character. I will differ. I love the brown and orange as a color scheme. A version of Terra does get a better color scheme way down the line. I'm excited for you to read that, but it's like way down the line. For now, it's a week. It's going to have to be a week. But I will die by that color scheme being great. The yellow and orange is it, or yellow and brown. I love it, especially for Terra. But that gives us the end of this volume. We get so much in literally like 8 issues. Craziness. I am fully exhausted. Like after reading everything with the Omega Men, I know I keep bringing it up. It's just, no. I'm over it. Never have to see them again in comics. Where can we find you, James?
I am on Instagram as GeekyJP, and I can also be found on Twitter as Proletary Thought.
Still not going to be able to pronounce that. You can find me at Joe Pride Art and Cosplay on Instagram and Twitter. You can find our collective podcast, Titans Together Pod, on Instagram, where we post randomly about fun stuff and announcements. And we do have merch on my TeePublic. I need to work on getting that merch to me because I am collectively absent-minded at all times. But yeah, thank you for joining us. This has been a fun time. Until next episode. Bye.
Bye.